Have you ever wondered if the reality you live in is real, or just a projection of your unconscious mind? What if I told you that what you call life might just be a reflection, a hologram, created by an intelligence operating beyond time, space, and even your conscious will? Over the centuries, this knowledge has been called hermetic, forbidden, occult. Today, it survives discreetly in forgotten manuscripts between the lines of ancient spiritual doctrines. And even in the subtext of modern physics, there is a truth that unites spirituality, neuroscience, and quantum physics, but it's systematically ignored. Why? Who profits from your unconsciousness? In what follows, you'll understand why you've never heard any of this before, and how this secret might change everything. People say the Kybalion is just a philosophical compendium about universal laws. But what if it's far more than that? What if it's a portal, a symbolic code meant to awaken a kind of perception most people don't even realize they have? Few know this, but some say the book wasn't written in the conventional way. It was channeled. The so-called three initiates, whose identities remain hidden to this day, would merely be vehicles of something much older, deeper, and perhaps more dangerous. It's curious how everything that's truly transformative stays hidden in plain sight. The Kybalion circulates freely, but almost no one really understands it. Its 7 principles, so simple in form, are like keys to access levels of consciousness that transcend ordinary logic. Why was this knowledge encoded in metaphors? Was it to protect it, or to protect those who dare to decipher it? The truth is, those who read with their eyes see nothing. But those who read with the inner eye feel something shift within. Modern science is slowly beginning to brush up against the limits of this ancient knowledge. When quantum physics talks about overlapping realities, and neuroscience proves that the brain can't tell the difference between what is imagined and what is lived, something begins to align with Hermetic principles. The all is mind. Is that a metaphor? Or a literal description of the structure of the universe? After all, if everything you see is interpreted by your mind, then what is reality, if not a projection? Some say the Kybalion works like an inverted mirror. It doesn't show you the world. It shows you who is creating the world inside you. And that can be unsettling. Because once you realize you are both the author and the reader of your own story, there's nowhere left to point the finger. Everything comes back inside. Everything is cause and effect, generated by you. That idea is liberating, but also terrifying. And what if it's true that we are sleeping gods inside a dream we've mistaken for reality? What if the Kybalion is actually a wake-up call? The kind of call you can only hear when the noise of the ego quiets down and something more subtle begins to pulse, like a forgotten memory. Reading it doesn't require intellectual effort, but emotional courage, because each principle dismantles a lie you believed about yourself. But what you might not yet know is that the book itself hides something that was never printed on the pages. An 8th principle, undeclared, but always present, whispering between the lines. And that's where things start to get really strange. In 1908, when the Kybalion was published, physics still bowed to Newton's logic, and the unconscious mind was just an emerging idea in Freud's imagination. Yet it described concepts that science wouldn't validate until decades later. How could the 3 initiates, hidden behind a pseudonym, write about vibration, polarity, and the mind as if they had access to quantum labs and MRI scans? Coincidence? Or access to a source that transcends linear time? The first principle, the all is mind, now echoes in experiments with the observer effect in quantum physics. Particles change behavior when observed. This means consciousness alters matter. The universe responds to the act of perceiving. Now think, what if the initiates already knew this long before any scientist formed a hypothesis? Could the Kybalion be a disguised preview of what we now call modern science? Or a subtle reminder that consciousness has always been the source of everything? Neuroscience also plays a role. Studies show that emotions create neural pathways, shape behavior, and literally rewire the brain. In other words, the mind doesn't just interpret the world, it shapes it. And what does the Kybalion say? Everything is dual, everything has poles. Emotions have frequencies too. Anger vibrates, so does love. You emit, you receive. Everything responds. But if you had known this all along, what would you choose to vibrate? Here's the point. What the three initiates wrote wasn't theory. It was a map. A map of an invisible territory where matter obeys the mind, and the mind is trainable like a spiritual muscle. And that territory is your inner reality. But who has the courage to navigate it? Few. Because there's no GPS, no shortcuts. The Kybalion doesn't give answers, it holds up mirrors. And each mirror shows you not what you want to see, but what you need to see. Science, as skeptical as it may be, is beginning to yield to mystery. Many scientists quietly study the Kybalion. They never say so openly, of course. But in conferences, papers, and experiments, terms appear like consciousness as the basis of the universe, collapse of the wave function, and vibrational potentialities. These are technical ways of saying what Hermes Trismegistus wrote thousands of years ago. The invisible governs the visible. But there's something even more unsettling. An unpublished theory connects the 7 principles of the Kybalion to layers of the human unconscious, and it's said that it could reprogram the mind at a quantum level. We believe what we see, touch, and feel is solid, concrete, real. But physics has already proven that over 99.9999% of matter is empty space. What we call body, chair, or world is actually a field of energy oscillating at different frequencies. What does that mean? That matter is a stable illusion, a mirage organized by the mind. The Kybalion said it long before science. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. But if everything vibrates, then everything responds to your vibration. Your emotion, your thought, your inner state, it's all an emission. And the universe? A vibrational mirror. It doesn't react to what you say, but to what you feel. Have you noticed how certain patterns repeat in your life? Similar situations, similar people, cycles that feel like movies on repeat? Maybe it's not the world repeating. Maybe it's your frequency that hasn't changed. Now think, what if matter is just the delayed reflection of what you vibrated yesterday? What if every object, person, or obstacle around you is just a symbol, a coded message from your own unconscious mind? That idea is unsettling. It removes the blame from the world and gives the power back to you. Because if everything is vibration and you're vibrating all the time, then you're creating, whether you know it or not. The problem is that no one taught us this. We were raised to react to the world, not shape it. We were taught to accept reality, when in fact, we should have learned to visit different realities through inner choices. The Kybalion calls this mental transmutation. Science calls it neuroplasticity. The name doesn't matter. What matters is that it's within your reach to change your vibration and change how reality organizes itself around you. But beware, changing your vibration isn't about fake smiles or mechanically repeating positive phrases. Real vibration comes from essence, not appearance. You have to go down to the emotional depths and change what's buried there. Guilt, fear, trauma, repetition. That takes courage. Matter, after all, is just the symptom. The cause is in the invisible, and that's where true transformation begins. But there's something even more disturbing. Some initiates claim that certain vibrational patterns, like fear or desire, are invisible life forms that feed on you without you noticing. Are we really in control, or are we just being subtly influenced? Have you noticed how on some days everything flows easily, while on others, even getting out of bed feels heavy? That's not random, that's vibration. Your energy field shifts according to your thoughts, emotions, and intentions. The Kybalion leaves no doubt. Everything vibrates. And where there is vibration, there is attraction. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you are, energetically. Neuroscience has already shown that prolonged emotional states create neural pathways, reinforcing mental and emotional habits. If you live in a state of scarcity, insecurity, or resentment, your field vibrates exactly that, and the world, as a quantum mirror, reflects situations that confirm that frequency. And the most dangerous part? It happens without you realizing it. It's automatic. It's unconscious. But the Kybalion goes further. It suggests that you can raise your vibration by conscious choice, not through empty affirmations, but through a change in internal state. It's like tuning a radio dial. The content you receive changes according to the frequency you emit. Are you ready to let go of the frequency of fear and access the vibration of abundance? It's not magic. It's emotional physics. What if emotions were passwords? Each one gives you access to a different kind of reality. Anger connects you to conflict. Guilt to punishment. Love opens doors that logic could never reach. This isn't empty spiritualism. It's real vibration, measurable by instruments that already detect heart coherence and brainwave frequencies in meditative states. Emotions are codes. Feelings are commands. Maybe that's why the greatest act of freedom is choosing how to feel, even when everything around you screams the opposite. But here's the secret. Few people tell you. Raising your vibration isn't about escaping negative emotions, but transmuting them. Using fear as a lever for courage. Using sadness as an invitation to presence. This is emotional alchemy. This is mastering your own frequency. But there's an even subtler level that few people notice. Some emotions, especially the ones you don't acknowledge, keep vibrating silently, shaping your reality beneath the surface. Do you really know what your vibration is right now? The Kybalion states, everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its opposite. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Love and hate, light and shadow, pleasure and pain, could they really be extremes of the same energy? This idea might seem absurd, until you remember how many times you've loved someone and, in the blink of an eye, felt anger toward that very person. Is that instability, or the natural oscillation of a single force? Science is starting to show signs that this duality is real, not symbolic. In the brain, the regions that process love and hate are almost the same. It's as if these emotions share the same engine, but with opposite directions. In other words, what changes is not the nature of the feeling, but the frequency at which it vibrates. This means you don't need to destroy an emotion to overcome it. You can transmute it. What if every pain you feel is just unrecognized love? What if every rage is a frustrated desire for connection? This is not a romanticized view. It's a deep reinterpretation of duality. The poles don't fight each other. They balance each other. The problem arises when you cling to only one of the extremes. You want only the light without the shadow. You want only calm without facing your inner storms. But balance doesn't lie in denying the opposite. It lies in integrating it. Hermetic philosophy understands that true strength lies in mastering the extremes, not avoiding them. The ability to move from one pole to another consciously without being dragged is called mental mastery. And this isn't learned in books or courses. It awakens through real experiences when life forces you to face contrast. And then comes the question, do you control your vibration, or is it still controlled by automatic reactions? Jung's depth psychology spoke of the encounter with the shadow as a necessary step in individuation, the process of becoming whole. And perhaps that's what the principle of polarity has been trying to tell us for centuries. You only become whole when you accept and transform both sides of yourself. The good and evil you project onto the world also live within you. But there's something few people notice. There is a frequency so refined, so elevated, that it dissolves the poles without erasing them, as if it merges light and shadow into a single point of consciousness. Some call it grace, others the void. What could it be? Have you noticed how life seems to operate in cycles? Moments of expansion followed by contraction, joy, then silence. Achievements followed by challenges. It's as if an invisible tide governs the flow of everything, internally and externally. The Kybalion describes this precisely. Everything flows in and out. Everything has its tides. It calls this the law of rhythm. But what few people know is that this force can be tamed or keep you trapped for your entire life. This rhythm doesn't only operate in the physical world. It acts within the mind, in emotions, in behavioral patterns you repeat without noticing. Have you ever wondered why, after a major breakthrough, something seems to pull you back? Or why the same kind of situation, person, or challenge always reappears, with a different face, but the same effect? That's not bad luck. It's the pendulum of rhythm swinging and pulling you with it. Science observes similar phenomena in the behavior of the brain and body. Circadian rhythms, brain waves, hormonal patterns all follow cycles. Quantum physics, in turn, speaks of wave collapses that repeat in pulses. In other words, everything pulses, including you. The question is, are you aware of these pulses? Or are you being carried by them like a leaf in the wind? The Kybalion suggests that the wise learn to rise above the swing of the pendulum. That doesn't mean not feeling, not living. It means not being dragged. It means being above the midline, where the swing still happens, but it no longer dominates you. This state requires inner vigilance, a consciousness capable of perceiving the very moment the tide starts to shift, and choosing not to sink with it. But how can you do that when we're so conditioned to react automatically? The key may lie in emotional neutralization, an almost forgotten skill, but profoundly transformative. It's not about suppressing feelings. It's about observing, feeling, but not identifying with them. The pendulum swings, but you remain still. This is the power of someone who has learned to master their own center, and there is still something deeper. Some ancient masters spoke of a frequency beyond time, a state in which rhythm ceases and consciousness touches the eternal. But what exactly is this state, and how can one reach it without losing oneself? We live as if things just happen, as if we were victims of events, people, and circumstances beyond our control. But the Kybalion says something unsettling. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. There is no such thing as chance. What you're living today is the echo of a choice, made consciously or unconsciously. And that changes everything. Because if it's true, then you're not in the world. You're projecting the world from the inside out. Modern psychology recognizes this principle under different names: behavioral pattern, self-responsibility, programmed unconscious. Quantum physics, on the other hand, suggests that the observer influences the behavior of the particle. But what happens when the observer is asleep, distracted, disconnected? They don't observe, they just react. And then life becomes a reflection of your traumas, not your consciousness. What if every thought were a seed, every emotion, an electrical current shaping the pathways of destiny? That means what you feel repeatedly, desire intensely, or fear obsessively, returns, not as punishment or reward, but as a vibrational consequence. But here's the secret no one tells you. The most powerful causes aren't created through effort, but through silent intention. The problem is, we live as effects. We react to other people's opinions, to bad news, to the numbers in our bank account. And every time you react, you reinforce the cycle. Every time you act from an internal cause, an authentic decision, a soul's impulse, you break the pattern. That is freedom. But it's scary, because it requires leaving autopilot and taking on a role most people avoid, the role of creator. The Kybalion suggests that masters don't escape the laws. They know them and operate above them. Not because they are special, but because they chose to awaken. And awakening means observing your hidden causes. Why do I repeat the same mistakes? Why do I attract the same kinds of people? What was the silent origin of this pain? When you find the cause, the effect dissolves, and a new reality begins to form. But what if some causes aren't from this life? What if you're living effects of choices you don't even remember making, in different times, bodies, or realities? Who then are you really, and how? Many layers does your consciousness silently carry? The principle of gender in the Kybalion is one of the most misunderstood. Many immediately associate it with biological male and female. But the ancient initiates knew this duality runs much deeper. Masculine and feminine are universal forces present in everything, in atoms, thoughts, emotions, and even in the most subtle planes of consciousness. They are the two halves of the creative power. And the most surprising thing? These forces are also within you, right now. The masculine side is impulse, direction, action. The feminine side is intuition, receptivity, nurturing. Every creation needs both. But most of us live in imbalance. Men who suppress their sensitivity, women who stifle their instinct for leadership. The result? Stagnant lives, broken relationships, blocked creativity. Creative energy gets lost, like a spring trying to flow, but finding its inner gates shut. In neuroscience, the left hemisphere of the brain is associated with logical thinking, an expression of masculine energy. The right, with intuition, an expression of the feminine. When there is harmony between the two, states of flow emerge, heightened creativity, expanded presence. What if true spiritual awakening is actually the inner union of these two primal forces? The sacred marriage between conscious action and full receptivity. The alchemists called it the conjunction of opposites. Jung spoke of the individuation process. The Hindus of Shiva and Shakti. Different names for the same energetic dance that moves the universe, and that can also move you if you know how to listen. But to ignore this principle is to live disconnected from your own capacity to generate reality. It's like having an inner sun and moon, and living in the dark. Now imagine, what could you manifest if you activated at the same time the clarity of reason and the power of emotion? If your action came from the purest instinct and your intuition was accompanied by focus and direction. That is the energy of conscious creation, of the word made flesh, of the idea turned into experience. But few dare to unite these forces, out of fear, out of pride, or out of sheer forgetfulness. But what if that forgetfulness isn't accidental? Some ancient writings suggest that the separation of these inner forces was induced to keep us spiritually sterile. Who would be interested in preventing you from accessing the full creative power that exists within you? Do you think you're in control of your life? Most people answer yes without hesitation. But what would you say if you knew that more than 90% of your decisions, emotions, and reactions are governed by something you can't even see or understand? The Kybalion states, the all is mind, the universe is mental. But this mind is not just the one you use to think. It's the hidden mind, deep, silent. The subconscious. Science has already revealed. Your subconscious controls your heartbeat, breathing, emotional patterns, and even the small gestures you repeat every day. It's what responds to reality, even when you swear you're in charge. The scariest part? It doesn't question. It simply accepts, stores, and repeats. And if it's full of limiting beliefs, childhood traumas, or inherited fears, your life will reflect exactly that. Just as the principle of cause and effect teaches. In Hermetic philosophy, the subconscious is seen as the womb of the mind, the feminine side of creation, where all ideas are gestated until they become reality. It receives the seed of conscious thought and returns it to the world in the form of circumstances. This means that every desire, fear, or intention you repeat with emotion sinks to this level and becomes matter, experience, life. The question is, what have you been planting? In there? Subconscious programming doesn't happen only through repetition. It's also shaped by symbols, religions, mythologies, brands. All use images, sounds, and words that bypass the logical mind and go straight to the emotional heart. The Kybalion is filled with symbols for this reason. It doesn't just want to teach, it wants to awaken. And awakening is something that happens from the inside out in the exact moment a truth resonates so deeply that it breaks through the layers of illusion. But accessing the subconscious is dangerous. It doesn't only hold your potential, it holds everything you've repressed, your shadows, your addictions, your forgotten truths. That's why few dive deep into this journey. It takes courage to face the files of the soul. But that's where the gears of your destiny lie. And whoever learns to reprogram them changes their entire universe. But there's something you still haven't been told. There are specific sounds, words, and symbols that open direct portals to the subconscious, and that have been used in Hermetic traditions for millennia. Why did these codes disappear, and who still keeps them in secret? Look around you now, at the people you surround yourself with, the situations that repeat, the challenges that insist on coming back. Do you really believe all of this is just coincidence? The Kybalion teaches, as above, so below, as within, so without. One of the most uncomfortable and powerful truths, because it removes blame from the world and hands the mirror back to you. Quantum physics already speaks of reality as a field of infinite possibilities where the observer, that is, you, collapses what is seen according to your inner state. And if that state is unconscious, confused, or filled with unresolved pain, the collapse will be chaotic. You won't see what you want, you'll see what you vibrate. The world becomes a distorted mirror of your emotional mess. But it's precisely in that reflection that the clue to your liberation lies. Everything that irritates you, wounds you, or triggers intense reactions in others carries something of your own, something you reject or haven't yet integrated. And you don't need to blindly believe this, just observe. The repetitions follow a pattern. The encounters are synchronized, the accidents have a message. The universe responds to your frequency, not your words. That's why the Kybalion never asks you to change the world. It invites you to transform the inner mirror. But this is a dangerous invitation, because it requires you to stop pointing fingers. It demands brutally honest self-reflection into your own inner abysses. Why do you always attract people who devalue you? Why does money seem to run from you? Why do certain dreams die before they're born? The problem is rarely out there. It begins with a distorted inner image that, without realizing it, you project and feed every day. And here arises a powerful key. The mirror is not for judgment. It's for revelation. Every painful situation is a chance for healing. Every difficult relationship is a disguised teacher. Reality is not your enemy. It's your most honest ally. And the more you cleanse the inner reflection, the more the world begins to respond with beauty, flow, and purpose. This is not magic. It's the quantum alchemy of consciousness. But what if the mirror can lie too? Some occultists claim that not every reflection is trustworthy, and that there are vibrational interferences capable of distorting your perception and manipulating what you attract. How can you recognize the true reflection among so many false ones? For centuries, science, spirituality, and psychology have walked along parallel paths, as if they belonged to separate worlds. But what if these lines, so carefully separated, were secretly converging toward the same point? The Kybalion speaks of universal laws, quantum physics of infinite possibilities, depth psychology of archetypes and the unconscious. 3 languages, 3 systems, one single truth fragmented into pieces. The Hermetic principle, the all is mind, may sound mystical, but it perfectly aligns with discoveries like the observer effect, where the scientist's consciousness influences the experiment. What does that tell us? That the mind doesn't just perceive the world, it alters it. And Jung, when speaking of synchronicity and meaningful coincidences, pointed to something beyond logic. External events connected to internal states. A secret dance between the visible and the invisible. But why does this knowledge remain marginal, almost forbidden? Because it hands power to the individual. It dismantles the idea of a fixed, determined, uncontrollable world. It says, you are the field, the transmitter, and the receiver. You are the trauma, and also the healing. Official science hesitates, institutional religion remains silent, and academic psychology labels it as mysticism. But those who live the experience don't need validation. They know. And this is where Hermeticism comes in as a bridge. It doesn't reject logic, nor does it ignore the invisible. It unites. It suggests that everything is mind, everything is energy, everything is vibration, concepts that science is beginning to study and psychology is beginning to feel. In a world where knowledge is compartmentalized, the true seeker is the one who dares to connect the dots, because truth doesn't hide in the extremes, it lives in the invisible space between them. You've felt this before, haven't you? That sense that there's something greater behind the numbers, the symbols, the words, a subtle intelligence that governs everything, but doesn't scream, it only whispers. Maybe that's why so many awaken not through books, but through experiences that collapse logic, a strong intuition, a vivid dream, a coincidence too impossible to ignore. In those moments, science, soul, and mind speak the same language. But there's something that remains unanswered. What if this entire convergence is part of a silent preparation, an alignment for something that is coming, something that only those who unite science, soul, and consciousness will be able to fully comprehend? What exactly is about to be revealed? The Kybalion states with chilling clarity, nothing escapes the law. This means that everything, absolutely everything, follows invisible patterns, subtle forces, and precise orders. There is no such thing as luck. There is no chaos, only synchronicity between cause and effect, vibration and attraction, polarity and manifestation. What you are living now is simply the exact response to what you have been, felt, and believed, even unconsciously. But this law is not punitive. It's pedagogical. It doesn't punish, it reveals. It reveals where you're vibrating, where you're still stuck, where something needs to be adjusted internally. It's like a mathematical mirror. It doesn't matter what you want. What matters is what you are. And here's the reason this truth is so often avoided. It demands radical responsibility. It requires letting go of the illusion that the world is to blame and recognizing that you are the creator of your own journey. Science, in turn, is beginning to brush up against this very same law. Studies on morphogenetic fields, heart, coherence, quantum entanglement, and epigenetic biology show that there is a hidden order sustaining life, a structure behind the form. The law, as the Kybalion suggests, is this field, unbreakable, unshakable. But, and here's the point, it can be transcended, not by magic, but by consciousness. Masters, says the Kybalion, are not those who break the laws, but those who have learned to operate above them. They are not swept away by the tide, by rhythm, by fluctuating emotions. They create their own timeline, their own vibration, and this isn't a gift reserved for the enlightened. It's a skill that emerges when you begin to observe, truly observe, how your choices generate consequences that echo far beyond the now. But here's the rarely spoken truth. The law also responds to intention. It is not merely mechanical. It feels. The purity of your intention shifts the course. A small act done with true awareness can change an entire chain of events, and that's frightening, because it means even your silence, even your most intimate thought, carries weight. It has consequence. It is shaping the invisible. But what if there are levels of the law we don't yet know? Some ancient Hermetic manuscripts speak of laws above the laws, patterns so elevated they seem like miracles to those still living on autopilot. Who are the ones already operating at this level? And what exactly do they know that we have forgotten? The Kybalion reveals something that challenges everything we've learned about change. Mind, as well as matter, may be transmuted. This is mental transmutation, the art of altering the vibrational states of the mind, a kind of invisible alchemy where the lead of doubt turns into the gold of certainty. But how does this work in practice? Is it truly possible to change reality just by changing what you think and feel? Quantum physics suggests that subatomic particles have no defined form until they are observed. They exist as possibilities, waves of probability, until a conscious mind interacts with them. This means thought is a collapse agent. What you think with enough intensity begins to take shape. But what no one tells you is that this transformation only occurs when the thought is charged with genuine emotion. In Hermeticism, the mind is like an alchemical furnace. Everything you throw in there, ideas, images, desires, begins to boil, condense, take shape. But if you don't know what you're putting in, the result can be chaotic, scattered, fragmented, aimless thoughts. Create fragmented realities. To transmute, in this context, is more than thinking positively. It is feeling with clarity and sustaining the vibration until the external world yields to it. Depth psychology speaks of reframing. But the Kybalion goes further. It's not just about reframing the past, it's about guiding mental energy to a new state, a higher, more refined state, more aligned with the all. You are not bound to what you think. You are free to think differently. And each new thought is like a stone cast into a silent lake. It sends ripples, ripples that reach far beyond what you can imagine. That's why initiates trained not just focus, but vibrational presence. It's not enough to visualize. You have to embody the vibration, to feel like someone who already lives what they desire. Because in that state, the mind and body emit a field that changes everything around you. People change, doors open, answers appear. And the most surprising part? None of it feels forced. Reality simply responds. But there's a special kind of transmutation.